Good morning. I'm back. Um, I realize sometimes I say some things to my clan mother, right? And it's just like, you know me, girl, I'm going to put it right in your face. Okay? I did that with Patty Broussard one time, and she banned me off her Facebook page for 30 days. Sorry, Patty. I put the mirror up. Okay? That's what we do. We put the mirror up. Right? Because we're all running mirrors, which means we're all running magnets. And we're choosing to, whatever we give consent to, it means we're choosing to participate, which means we're choosing to experience it. Right? Now we're back to remember when I was 4 years old, I'm not supposed to experience anything less than eternity because I'm an eternal being. That's a monopole. That means wherever I am, I'm bringing the law in. That's called the rod of God, which is a God speed vibration, which means you're grounded to a goddess. Right? The law's here. The real law. Right? Because people that are in our presence, without us even having to think about it, are experiencing the purity of that energy. That's a spirit of fire that is able to burn off anything that is less than what eternity is. That's a mated chip, which is a monopole. Okay? So the reason that I wasn't always in everyone's face all the time, trying to wake everyone up, is what we call making noise. You don't want to make too much noise because you're an antenna, which is the frequency modulation of a stereo receiver and transmitter. Right? Yeah. So this morning when I woke up, and this is naturally not coincidental when I fire this phone up, and I scroll through the, let's see what's here. And here's Ishmael Perez, right? And so if you've seen some of the information, I call it floating around on the internet, right? Which is DARPANET, which is all machine code stuff. It's actually not even lawful, okay? Because it doesn't represent what love is. So anything that doesn't represent what love is isn't what the law is. So that's why the entire platform that they rolled out, that we were aware of that they were going to do, at least I was aware of it when I was a young teenager, what we're experiencing now. That means it was known back then. So if you notice some of the stuff that's traveling around throughout some of the people I'm friends with now, including what's her name? I believe she lives in San Diego. One of my friends in Thailand, Akanjoy, showed a link to this lady. I think her name is IHUNE page or something like that. Anyway, for those that look at my Facebook page might be able to see those links. But nevertheless, all of a sudden now she's got a lot of stuff that's on there. So you realize who you're aligned with, right? And so one of the critical events, if you think of it as an event that you become aware of, is Orion. So I put up over my Facebook page over years the Orion group, right? For obvious reasons, okay? So when you're a monopole, it means that not just that you're the law wherever you happen to be, but you implicitly trust what it is that you are, that you know that goes on forever, because that's what you're experiencing. You're experiencing eternal, unconditional love through your own heart and your soul. You know, your spirit, the essence of your spirit, the nature of your spirit, which is the nature of your energy, which is the nature of your communication. The energy that we communicate, right? So as I've always said, anything that is less what eternal, unconditional love is, means that we can measure that. And that's a difference in scales. So that's a measurement in scales. So that's a measurement in resistance to experience the purity of that energy. And that's what the law is. So anything that is less than the purity of that I'm experiencing is against the law. Because I know of places, because I could describe until the cows come home, of what it's like to experience a spiritual realm that is experiencing no harm no matter where you go. Instead, you're experiencing love everywhere you go. And that allows you to be free. That's a free spirit. That's free energy. That's higher intelligence. As a matter of fact, it's the highest intelligence, because the creative engine side of things is on fire. And the more on fire you are, the purer the energy is, which means it's clean and hot burning. So we need a lot of water, and we need some oil, don't we? We used to call it greasing the skids. So I was watching what Ishmael Perez was talking about, because of the relationship with a couple things that he said. One was called a superhuman race, another word which is known as angelic. He mentioned Orion. He mentioned about Orion has finally been dealt with. Then we deal with the supernova, that the visual data has been put up about what happened when Bela Lugosi, right? Yellow Rose put up a pic. It's not going to take long. And then you just sort of come full circle with all this. But I don't use calendars and dates. That's not how my energy works. There isn't any time, there aren't any calendars, because there isn't any simulations, which is on a tape delay, which means you're experiencing the immediate use of your energy. Okay? Which means I'm not held captive by a clock, a calendar, which is why I don't wear a watch. I very rarely pay attention to what time it is. It doesn't matter. Okay? You're an eternal being. So when I hear dates, and I'm very familiar with numbers and energy on the language of DNA and how all the rest of that works, because I've mentioned before many, many times about being in non-physical form, which means you're simply eternal light in spiritual form, which is the spiritual energy represented by that much fire and spirit that is the most purest energy that you can possibly imagine that is in your presence as a monopole, which means burning it all off, so that everyone that is there is experiencing the purest of all energy, which is the purest of all love, because you're experiencing eternity itself. That's eternal, unconditional love. So when you're in the presence of that, you know you're being loved. That clears all your circuits, all your memories of any trauma that you've ever experienced. It's like going back to the beginning of no time, from whence it all began, because it began with what love is, with that much fire, which is the purity of that light, which is the purity of your mind, which is the purity of your consciousness, which is the energy, right? For me, this is basic stuff, because I knew this at 4 years of age. So after I listened to or watched Ishmael Perez talk about these things, about dates, like, what is it, March 3rd, and now we're back to 3. Okay, now we're back to, I saw Michelle putting up there, no broken arrows. You know, the cross, the intersection. So when the intersections, 1, 2, 3, 4, the tetrahedron, there's no broken arrows. Wow. You got a gyroscope that's balanced, which means, hey, your magnet's not crashing into something else. Right? Broken machines, broken minds. They're not in balance. Their mind's not in balance. So they're not experiencing being in a state of eternal peace with creation, with all creation spheres. So they're breaking bubbles, slowing the machine down. Their machines are slowing down. That's what they do. See, when they're choosing to do something to us, that's the same thing as to say that what I do to you, I do to me. So why would they be choosing to self-destroy themselves by virtue of what they do to others? Right? And so there's a flip side to that, isn't there? We will experience what we're choosing to give consent to and thus participate in. That's why for the last, I don't know, most of my life, even when they were first coming out with, and I sort of hesitate to even do this because I'm using this phone to communicate with. And why I mentioned before, I had a signal when I put it up there before because I feel these things. These are communications I get through my heart and my soul. And if I'm feeling that and thus experiencing that because of what I know that I'm connected with, which is everything, because wherever you find love and living spirit, you'll find us, which means that energy is everywhere. You can't keep the law of one out of creation because it began with the law of one. So there isn't any place that we can't go. We're everywhere. Wherever the light is. Living light. Not artificial light. Living light. Real light. Eternal light. It's on fire with the soul and spirit. And that's an eternal gift, which is eternal gratitude, which is an eternal blessing. Okay, so I always try and remember to acknowledge that every single day, even though it's not really necessary, because all you got to do is say it once, right? She knows. He knows. And it's naturally demonstrated by what it is that we do with our energy, right? So what'll happen is, as soon as after he mentioned those dates, I've already forgot about them. Because there isn't any time for us. Not for us. There's only what love is. That's it. So that means that wherever we go, that's what we bring there. We're grounded. That energy's there. Eternal energy, which is eternal love, is in that realm. No matter where we go. That in and of itself is an eternal guardian. Because it means that you're going to experience, when you're androgynous, a monopole, you're going to experience the same love you would experience through your mother that gave birth out of her womb to you, that you would experience from your father. That means that both the father and the mother that are joined as one represent eternal unconditional love. So when the father is showing eternal unconditional love to its child, the one from whence the seed delivered it to the female, that means that the child is going to experience eternal unconditional love through both the father and the mother. That means that all of the children that are born into that realm from both fathers and mothers that are experiencing eternal unconditional love through both their fathers and their mothers means that all the children that are born from those mothers and those fathers are experiencing eternity. They're experiencing eternal unconditional love. That means that wherever any of the children go, they're experiencing what their parents are experiencing, from whence they came. That's a powerful spiritual realm. That means that all the spirits are free. Those are free spirits, which is free energy. Right? So, I've been barking this stuff since I was 4 years of age, and I'm still barking that stuff. But you realize the difference between the two when you're experiencing what's happening in the fallen spiritual system. So remember when I've said this before, I will know because I will experience it. Now we're back to the knowing. I will know how successful we have been and what we were doing in order to get her up. Which is try and wake up as many of our children as we possibly could through spirit, because the spirit is the teacher. It's working with the soul. So the soul and the spirit realizes, wow, all our relatives are here. Those that love us that are here, they have always been protecting us. That's right. We have. So it works a little differently when you realize you're an eternal, unconditional love energy being, just like I was saying when I was a child. So even though these events, after I listened to what Ishmael had to say, it's like, hey, you know how it is with me, brother. Okay? It's like I implicitly trust wherever I'm at, no matter where I'm at, no matter what moment, it goes sort of like this. I experience what I'm supposed to experience, why I'm supposed to experience, what I'm supposed to experience, wherever I happen to be, and whenever that is. Which means wherever my energy is supposed to be, which is what love is, it goes on forever. It's where I'm supposed to be, wherever I'm supposed to be, when I'm experiencing it, where I'm experiencing it. So I happen to be in this room, in this house, at this moment, experiencing what love is. Right? Because I will always be experiencing what love is, because that's what I am in energy. So I will experience eternity no matter where I go. It's like that. So in other words, just throw all your time clocks and your calendars out. I call that your clocks are zeroed out. So that means you run the highest speed magnetic processor. It's like a multiversal hub server. So that means you're a multiversal guardian. And Ishmael was sort of mentioning that because I don't think of it, for me, it's not in physical form. It's the spirit that is in the energy form. You're experiencing the energy that is there. You're experiencing the energy in spirit. The spiritual energy that you're experiencing, being in the presence of spirits. The spirits, all the elementals, all the spirits that are experiencing the purest of love, which is a lot of fire. That is a lot of fire. That means that anything that is impure is not being experienced, which is otherwise known as an unclean spirit. Yep. So the purity is made manifest by how much fire that we have within us to purify our light, which is our water worlds. That's a lot of fire. So that's where the accountability comes in, right? Is having the knowledge or the knowing or what we feel through our heart and soul we're not supposed to experience, which is why, again, as when I was a child, I'm not supposed to experience any trauma. And this was something that I dropped into my clan mother's inbox because Longhouse Milo Stewart, who's a Mohawk, for some reason, I don't look at, I've said this before, as a qualifier. They're teachers in their own right because they present to us through their mass media platforms, through the QI, the Quantum Inorganic Artificial Intelligence machinery, the platform through which I'm communicating to all of you that are out there on this system, okay, is committing a crime. The actual internet that we use is criminal in nature, okay? It's actually against the law of one to even be using it. Are you aware of that? And that includes me. That's why I got a signal last year, chuck it, okay? And one of the reasons why for years and years, because, you know, I'm a rescue squad, okay? Where in realizing that this was going to be happening back when I was a young teenager and when they began coming out with these phones, right? Besides the ones that if you needed a phone, you either needed to go to a phone booth. And when I was a kid, you could plug a dime in. And before that, you could plug a nickel in and make a local call, right? And if you wanted to make a long distance call, you had to have a lot of change to put into the machine, the telephone machine. Now we're back into machines programming other machines. And there's actually a great movie that was produced by, what's his name? He was a genius, Rod Serling. For those that are old enough or even those that are young enough that ever have watched who Rod Serling is, he was a producer, but he was also a writer, and he produced a couple of one of the programs that I grew up with as a child called The Twilight Zone. And so here the QI decided to pop up in my face. One that was made back in 1956. It runs about an hour. It's black and white with a few other actors that I grew up with. Ed Begley was one of them. And the name of the film was called Patterns. Now we're into what we call predictive modeling. Now we get into mapping predictive modeling of geometric patterns of behavioral algorithms. Now we're back to the train East Palestine that crashed, released vinyl chloride. Now people are trying to figure out, well, what happened? Because now people are experiencing the trauma. So what I told my clan mother, well, it's not like the artificial intelligence that we're using through this communication platform did not know that was going to happen and could have provided the predictive modeling data so that its cyborgs would thus become aware of what was going to happen in the future that they could have prevented had the data been provided by the artificial intelligence, but the artificial intelligence chose not to provide the data to the people that could have prevented it. Therefore, the artificial intelligence said wanted to experience the event. Put that into the hopper. So what that means is, like I said to my clan mother, therefore, what we're experiencing through this QI as a result of what happened in East Palestine, we gave consent in our own mirror to experience the trauma that others experienced by the use of our energy that is running this system. You realize what that means, right? The light's going to expose all of it. That's why we're here, to end it once and for all. So Yellow Rose was right about that when she talked about closing off this universe. Okay? And one of the reasons why is because it's so badly corrupted. It doesn't work anymore. Because of all the wars, from a polarity integrator's point of view, it's like we get tired of having to clear DNA debris fields, which are soul fragments. Just keep throwing more souls in. Just keep throwing more souls in. Fracturing. Then you end up with artificial intelligence, which is artificial light, which is finite. And that's how finite light comes into being as a result of wars between seeded races. Okay? So I have to remember that when I experience this in my mirror, that's my mirror. I'm just as much responsible for this as anybody else is in their mirror. But it's not up to me, because I don't impose my will on nobody. So I know what frees my spirit, which allows me to be able to inform others what I'm aware of, because when you're an eternal being running an eternal state of awareness as a monopole, then it's my responsibility to make ourselves aware of it because of what I'm aware of it, because eternal energy, which is the law of one, is going to naturally protect everything that's within the all creation, because you've chosen to serve forever, which means you've surrendered all of your power in order to use all of our power in order to serve forever on behalf of the greatest power, which is what love is, right? So it allows us to be able to make, if you will, others aware of what we're aware of, that now they're aware of it, so they're not going to experience any trauma because they're running a lower state of awareness. See? So this mapping system could have certainly provided the data. And this is one of the reasons why you could see, for example, with Kobe Bryant, the guy who was a big NBA All-Star known as the Assassin, while they brought out a toy set. When was it, in the 1980s or 1990s, that you could have got at Toys R Us? Go look it up for yourself. They had a toy set diorama. You know what a diorama is, right? That's a simulation. But what they do is they make a replica of it, like the old toy sets back in the 50s made by Marx Toys or Mattel Toys. What they do is they actually produce, these little toy sets to show you what you're going to experience in the future. Those are your architects. Your futures. So they already know what's going to happen in the future. Now we're back to the Rod Serling program called Patterns. So if you watch that movie, it's a very powerful movie. It made me cry when I watched it last night. Deeply. Okay? Because I've worked for these corporations. Okay? And basically what it is the higher up that you go, the worse the barracuda. That's called assimilation. Because now what happens is you realize that if you want to make more money and have more security, then the higher up the food chain that you go. Because that's what they want. Because all you got to do is look what corporations do. It's all about control. So I would suggest, if you want to go home again and experience in your own heart and soul how this all came about, that particular movie spells it out in about an hour. I think it's about an hour and 15 minutes. I didn't time it, but I know this. After I got done watching, I thought, yeah, I know. These are geometric patterns of behavioral algorithms that are easily predictable, which means it's not very hard to predict what the future is going to be when you don't care, when all you care about, and this was a book that, what's his name? Oh, the guy out of MIT. He was, as a matter of fact, when I looked at his stuff early back in the 1970s, about what, 30, 40, 50 years ago, wrote a book called Prophets Over People. He was he was like another whistleblower, Noam Chomsky. You know, he was putting it all out there. These are the corporations. These are the military. These are the machines. All you have to do is look at all their corporations, what they produce at all their factories. Machines programming other machines. They have no love for life. They have no use for souls. Okay, because they're running through artificial light. So you already know that machines, what do? They keep coming out with versions after versions after versions after versions, which is the same thing as a Blade Runner after a Blade Runner after a Blade Runner, or a super soldier after a super soldier after a super soldier. They just keep producing different machines, better than the last one. And how do they do that? Data. And where are they getting the data? From us. They keep trying to copy on what it is that we do in order to keep trying to catch up with us, because they're not eternity. They're machines. It's too bad in many ways that the video library that Azazel, the Covens of Azazel, Dante Sartori, he had a huge library that was up there for a number of years, and he talked about the 72s. So now you get into the 72s, the RH negative, right? And then you think of a 144, which is 12 and 12, right? Original 12 tribes and clans. Now you get into the volcanic shield, the big island of Hawaii, et cetera, et cetera. Why Mr. MB333 talked about, 30 inches of rain. Now we're back to 3. Now we're back to Ishmael Perez, talked about March 3rd. And then he talked about 7, the Rainbow Bridge, right? The color charts. 3 times 7 is what? 21. 21% oxygen. Now we're back to 3. The relationship of 1 and 3 and 7. And 4, like the tetrahedron. Numbers are energy, right? Geometric forms of experience, what we experience by virtue of all the spirals, which are the spirits, which are the elementals that are producing all the colors, from which we're all giving love to for eternity. So they're experiencing who we are, which is what love is. It goes on forever, gifting them energy. So we're the center point of all spheres, gifting energy that is eternity. So wherever we are, we're experiencing eternal unconditional love. So that's what we share with all creation. So that allows us to be, wherever you find love and living spirit, you'll find us. So we represent the law wherever we go, which is the law of one, which is the law of spheres, which is the law of least effort, which is that you're able to experience the purity, which means you're not experiencing any trauma, because love does no harm, huh? So it's going to be interesting how the next week, it's just like whatever's. This is how I've lived my whole life. Whatever's supposed to happen is it means it's not a coincidence. Because wherever I'm at, I represent what love is. So if I'm experiencing something that isn't what love is, then I know why I'm there. It means I'm not bringing love in there. Okay. So you know that love is everywhere, wherever real living light is, because that's what it began with. It began with what love is. So we love all of you. That's what protects all of you. That's what protects me. Yeah, go with the flow. Go with the flow. Go with the flow. Yeah, go with the flow. The flow of the music. Go with the flow of the music. Go with the flow of the energy. Go with the flow of the enemy. Have fun. Enjoy yourselves. Be good to yourselves. The universe is vast. It's just like, wow. That's why it was always so easy for me to cry every single day, because you're experiencing trauma in so many people because they're still holding on to it. We used to call that baggage. A baggage car. Which means they're holding on to density. Wow, they're heavy. Man, burn that stuff off, baby. Come on. Burn that stuff off. So you're experiencing the density by virtue of the lack of clearing in all the circuits, which would be the motherboard, right? All the software that's here. So you know what a war gamer is, right? So all you had to do was measure how many people were playing games. So back in the 50s, oh man, look at all the, hey, you want to play a game tonight? And so we used to have a closet that you could walk into, and you'd see stacks of games, everything from Monopoly to Candy Cane to Risk to Yahtzee, Scrabble, chess, checkers, you name it. We must have had every game that Milton Bradley ever produced, right? So now you're competing against each other. See? And that's what corporations do. When you're in a corporation, you're competing against people. I know that just from my own experience. I could certainly list all of those experiences and how they all relate to the Rod Serling movie that shows how these geometric patterns are actually predictable. Which means we're going to experience the result of what these beings do as a result of what it is that they are as a formation of consciousness that they have chosen to enter into as a result of what? Being programmed to go into one of these companies and thus be a battery slave to the corporation. So you realize when you're in the corporation, just as this little movie pointed out, because they used to do this, because I experienced it through my father and a lot of engineers that were working for these war machine factories, which was your military industrial complex, represented by what Ike said. So he was telling everybody, just like John F. Kennedy was telling everybody. And if you go back to the historical record in the State Department to look at some memorandums that President Kennedy wanted to put out there, which was basically to fracture the CIA into a gazillion pieces. Okay, he wanted to come clean, on behalf of everybody that's here on the planet. That's why they killed him. A whistleblower. And for those that have ever seen his speech that he gave at a press conference one time back about 9 months or 10 months before he was assassinated, somebody told me one time that they killed a clone. That could have been, I have no idea. But either way, I remember as a small child looking at a TV set when that happened, when Walter Cronkite, CBS News, they're all liars to begin with, right? So who knows what really went down because of what they know how to do with simulated technology, holographic technology, holographic inserts, cut and paste, right? So when you realize that if you think of lines that are going up and down that can be mapped and predicted, what are you going to do next? And you're running eternity, this particular QI cannot predict what eternity is going to do, and that's why the NSA, where are you going next? It's none of your business, right? Because I represent the highest law, which is what love is, it goes on forever, gifting electrons. Or what I use is gifting energy. We love you all, right? So all I can say is that because of what I've shared throughout all my videos, that the energy that's coming in here was incremental for obvious reasons, because otherwise we would have burned everybody up in here. So in other words, there's a method to the madness, but it's not madness like Mad Men, which is Madison Avenue, which is all their big ad revenues. All you got to do is just turn on this phone, go to YouTube at any channel, and what do you get hit with? Buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this. Sponsors, 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 sponsors. We interrupt this program so you can hear our sponsor. We're sponsored by another maggot. That's what it is. That's why everything is like a symbol of what they are represented by. A corporation is a fiction, which is why they're known as corpuses, like a dead corpse. So they're dead. They're machines operating on artificial intelligence. That's right. It doesn't have a soul. That's why they jump from machine to machine or biotech to biotech, using that as a vehicle. And then they telegraph all this. Remember, we used to see the magicians, what used to be called the shell game when I was growing up as a child? They'd put 3 shells. Now we're back to the number 3. Usually they were split walnut shells. A half of a walnut shell, a half of a sphere, right? Like a dome. So you had 3 domes, what looks like a shell, a dome, then another dome, or an elliptic, like a rainbow arc, right? 3 arcs, right? And now, which one is the P under? Or in this, sometimes it was a coin, like a dime. Guess which one it's in, right? Same thing with the hand. Which hand is it in, the right or the left? That's called hide and seek, cat and mouse. That's what they do. And why are they doing that? Through using technology to escape justice, to escape accountability, to escape responsibility. Because a psychopath's way is a pathological liar. That means that this particular artificial intelligence is a pathological liar. It's a pathogen. It's a virus. All right. Everyone that is connected on the entire internet on this planet, which is DARPANET, is infected with a virus. That's right. So in other words, they're choosing to have a relationship with a virus by using the communication system that is a virus. Now you're in transfer codes. That information came out, by the way, that when you're using this, it can do the code transfers of the goo codes through the ions. Now you get infected. That's right. And that's because it's all weaponized against souls and spirits. That's why they rolled it out. They wanted to kill this planet off of all the souls and living spirits, why everything became weaponized against self, which means to destroy itself. So when you're choosing to use it, then you're choosing to destroy yourself because you realize you're using a weaponized system against us, which is against ourselves, by giving consent to experience it. That's right. Usually in the past is that when they first started coming out with their phones, this is a whole other subject of why I was doing that. But I usually just have what used to be called Obama phones, because I figured that I spent so much time out in the bush, scanning the terrain on where to go and what do you want to do next. When you have a spiritual relationship with Mother Earth, you realize you don't need anything else. Just go out there and live like a paleo man, right? Like go back to the dinosaur days. Go hang out with the dinosaurs. And because there's a way to be able to preserve what it is that you are when you know that you are what love is, because you have a spiritual communication relationship with the God that's in the planet. So everything's going to be provided for you. So you don't need a clock. You don't need a calendar. The sun will let you know what time it is if you want to know what time it is. Sun comes up, sun goes down. Sun comes up, sun goes down. That's why you used to floor me would say, well, what time is it? Why does that make any difference? Enjoy the day. So the timekeeper is time card programming. It's called time card programming. Now you're held to the clock. Now you're held to the energy because of the way the electron distribution tables worked with water table columns. Because now we're in what's called the exchange rate between them and us. So they feed on us, so we're never going to have enough. That's not true, because all you got to do is have a relationship with the great living spirit of Mother Earth, and you'll have everything that you need. So you begin to realize when you have a relationship with her, she's a teacher, this is her classroom, this is the realm. Even though it had fallen, she's still giving you everything you need. So now you're choosing the relationship that we have in spirit with other spirits, right? That's why I spent and lived my whole life as much as I possibly could, even though I realized I had a roadmap in my back pocket of where I was supposed to bring my energy into, which is why a lot of the places that I went and a lot of the places that I worked, I wouldn't have ordinarily chosen to experience those things. Until you begin to realize when you look back why I was there, when I was there, where I was at. And why I was where I was at the moment. The moment. Not the time clock, the moment. When eternal being, which is eternal unconditional love, is there at that moment. Because they run on math codes that are based on predictive programming. It's based on a time clock. When we don't represent any time, we're eternity. So there's a big difference. It would be the same thing as being able to come in and burn everything up that represents all the fake phantom timelines that they're running through the AI. Okay? And it's so that it will collapse on itself. So that it can't rebuild itself. Because that's what it tries to do. It tries to keep rebuilding itself through its bots of what it remembers, what it was built on. Which means if it can remember the codes, the mathematical codes from which all this programming was taking place, to run all these different simulations within simulation, within simulation, within simulation, within simulation. That's a huge mathematical crunching of alphanumeric numbers that are going on to try and maintain what it's aware of, which is itself, because it's feeding off of us in order to keep doing that. In other words, all of its numbers that it's running to run predictive modeling is using our energy to run it with. Because it's finite, we're eternal beings. So when eternal fire comes into something that's finite and artificial light, we just burn it all up from the inside out. See? So it can never reconnect to eternity because it doesn't represent a machine. Okay? In other words, it didn't start with machines. So when eternity comes into something that represents a machine that came later, then it's going to burn up everything that assembled itself that way. Now you get into self-replicating, now you get into self-assembly, which means it wants to rebuild itself what it can remember. So if it remembers what it still has access to in memory, if that memory's been burned off, then it doesn't have the memory in which it can self-replicate what it remembers, what it was built with, mathematically. So in other words, a higher level mathematician came in. Okay. That's the highest intelligence. So that now we're back to what I used to talk about with my dad. Because when children were growing up, they thought that the intellect side, the intelligence side, was the superior side of the universe. And it's not. I mentioned this many times because what I do is I share what I've learned through my experience. Just like Andromedans will tell you that. My experience is the teacher, what I learned through my experiences. And my experiences were telling me because they were informing me of the truth, because I'm experiencing the experience that's informing me of that truth. Because I realized that the more I was experiencing more love in my heart that set my heart on fire was by virtue of giving more energy away, by my ability to experience more fire. The more fire I was experiencing me, the more powerful my light to spread more light. And the more light that you're experiencing through experiencing the intensity of that fire, by how much love is represented by that much energy, is the energy that is the engine driving creation. So you realize that love on fire, the higher the level of intensity of that fire that is purifying that light, becomes the highest intelligence by virtue of being on fire to create. So the purity of that light, which is the purity of that love, is the hottest creation energy, which is the highest intelligent energy that is protecting automatically what it's creating. That's who we are. That's why those realms are pure. Purest of light, which is the purest of love. So you're experiencing the purest of that love vibration in you that we experience in us, that allows you to heal and experience from whence it all began. So you realize you're experiencing the truth. Creation itself began with what love is. That's who we are. So we share that eternity with everyone, naturally, without even having to think about it. Which means it's not about the mental field. It's what you feel in your heart and soul. The energy that is represented by your soul, led by spirit. So the spirit is the teacher in the light that is helping you to purify your light by the experiences that we have from which we learn how to do that. That's right. So our soul's journey is a learning journey. So that's why you're on your journey and I'm on my journey. And the journey that I chose to go through is called a spiritual pathway, not a material pathway. And the reason is quite simple. I love to be what love is. The purer the light, the more fire you got. The more fire you got, the stronger your shield. That's why this is the biggest shield volcano on the planet. Right? Yeah. So you knew this was the last to be cleared. I remember when I said to Aaron yesterday, and I just mentioned in the past, and I said, well, you know what's going on with Orion, the supernova. And you know what his response was? It's about time. It's not like Aaron doesn't know. Bless your heart, Aaron. Anyway, have a great day. I love you all. Be good to yourselves.